Okay, so now I just want to give you a short introduction of my journey, how I became an artist, essentially, and just to give you a bit of an understanding. Maybe it will inspire one or the other of you. Usually, it's like you often hear people say, "Oh, you're talented" or anything like this. I wouldn't describe myself as talented or something like that. I definitely had to put in the work hours. So whenever others would, I don't know, watch a movie, hang out at a soccer field, or go to a bar or something, I would often prefer to do creative things. I would also do the other things as well, of course. But in hindsight, each time I would prioritize my personal hobby over those habits, it would sum up over time. So by the time I was like 18 years old, I already had quite a presentable workload, but also worked already for a couple of known clients, which is, of course, a big advantage, especially if you apply for university, which I did. So my works basically gave me access to study a thing called interactive media design. Interactive media design was basically everything that had to do with interaction. It could be on all sorts of platforms, let's say. But during that time, we mostly explored apps. I feel like, and websites maybe a bit less. Initially, I found interface design fun and challenging. While studying interactive media design, that opened me a lot of doors. I was able to work for Honda Europe, for example, and we were doing like car interfaces while still being in a student position. But I was also later taking on a job as a working student at a telecommunication company called Deutsche Telekom. So those were great experiences in the interface field. So in both cases, I had to design cross-platform. So again, meaning one application had to work on a tablet, same as on a phone or a PC or a television. And for me, that became very repetitive because it meant basically you had to design the same interface again and again, just for different platforms. You just had to figure out how buttons would move, if the screen enlarges and stuff like that. And yeah, as I mentioned, it was quite repetitive for me. So while still being a student, I tailored my master thesis to marry the two topics I connected with the most, and those were art and games. So in 2015, I submitted my master thesis, which I labeled as Fashion and Games. I created a fictional fashion brand and drafted a concept how this brand that I created could carry itself digitally through in-game marketing, same as real-world marketing, to cover both worlds at the same time. So I thought it was quite interesting. And also, I don't know if you guys remember the trailer for Deus Ex, and there was like the main character basically wearing a Japanese fashion branded jacket from a company called Acronym. And that also was kind of the starting point for my thesis. Actually, I already defined my thesis right before that trailer came out. So there were a few other examples out there, but it was not really a big deal back then. So yeah, you can see the concept that I had, a bit of what we have nowadays with skins and cosmetics. So it pretty much became reality and very profitable as well. So just imagine that with actual branding. Some of the images I created for that would require me to use photo bashing techniques, which, as some of you may know, is very common in concept art. So all the experience I gained through this helped me to get a very good understanding also of how 3D models are made, and textured. As you can see here in the pictures, I had like a textured hoodie, and I even manipulated the UV files of the P90 in Counter-Strike Go. So I gained a lot of experience with this, and it gave me a very good understanding and that was also a very good starting point in general, I'd say. So after getting a hang of doing concept art, I would start taking online courses just to get better, and one of them was Learn Squares. So yes, you heard right. That's literally where I started, actually, to become a concept artist. So one of my homeworks, that actually, I'd say, was a big part of how I landed my first job in the video games industry. So after taking the course, roughly 1 year later, that granted me access to the video games industry after intensive studying and learning, of course. So my first job I could count as industry experience was at Crytek Frankfurt. The games they were working on were the perfect opportunity for me to learn while having fun, but also start using one of the world's most popular tools for game development, the CryEngine. I started out doing 2D assets initially for marketing, where I would like do renders with the engine and go over in Photoshop or something. But I would essentially do concept art already, just with the engine. And while I was still working there in Crytek, I would actually later transition to a concept art role where I could apply those learned methods that I learned while doing marketing assets. So I had quite a unique approach to concept art in that sense. And that experience also gave me the chance to later, with my second job in the industry, to work on the Division 2 for Massive Entertainment in Malmö. And that it was a first time working also for something bigger like Ubisoft. That was, of course, pretty exciting for me. So one of the first tasks they were giving me was to design a fully functional drone that could do all sort of things besides flying, obviously. So it had to have a deploy animation. It had to fold in a certain way, which I actually designed and figured out myself. And then it had to have a couple of different mods with different abilities. So it was quite a complex task as a first thing to do. So despite me struggling a lot with it, it was perceived so well that I quickly became responsible to do more gadgets. In fact, I ended up doing all character gadgets for the release. So, and this is basically where I found my niche to do prop design. So during the time making prop design, having a couple of more of these projects, just becoming more and more experienced, I quickly became aware that there are ways to improve the overall translation from concept to in-game asset, at least for me. So, which I would focus on more and more with each project is how I can guarantee that what I'm creating as a concept will also look like this in game, because there are a lot of variables that can differ your design eventually once it's pushed through a pipeline and a couple of people have worked with it. So in order to maintain, and get this one-to-one implementation of your design, there are certain things you need to know, which will also be covered in this course. So I realized that I could have the most impact on the final look of an asset by understanding how everything else in the pipeline works, basically. With the time, my concept would cover more and more packed information to guarantee the end result to be a complete experience where every bit feels thought through, which is what we, as I said, will cover here in this course.